Well, moving on to other events that made the news this past week, Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission has announced Ahmed Usman Ododo of the All Progressive Congress, winner of Kogi State governorship election. Speaking at INEC's Collation Center in Lokoja, the Kogi State capital, the returning officer for the election declared Ododo as the victor with 446,237 votes. Murtala Jaka of the Social Democratic Party, SDP, came in second with 259,052 votes, and Dino Melaye of the People's Democratic Party polled 46,362 votes to come third in the election.
I call on you all, especially my brothers, the co-contestants, to come and join me to discuss the affair of our dear state for greatness. After all, we don't have any other state that we can call our state except Kogi State. We are coming to build on the legacy of His Excellency. We are coming to improve on his achievements. I call on every one of you to join me to move the state forward. And by the special grace of God, he said, you are going home. You are not going home. Your work has just started. You are a student. We will continue to learn from you. You will continue to serve the state, but this time around as a critical stakeholder.
All right, I'm Usman Ododo. At the moment, governor-elect in Kogi State haven't won the election in the off-cycle elections. But the striking thing is, the fallout from the election is the fact that Dino Melaye of the People's Democratic Party has questioned the entire process, faulted the entire process, and more importantly, has also questioned the integrity of INEC, the umpire in the elections, as he claims infractions, manipulation, malpractices were reckless and free for all, literally, in the course of the election. What do you think about that particular election?
Well, of course, that's the story of the Nigerian election, in recent times. Yes. It's always dogged with one controversy or the other, and ultimately it will be left to the courts to decide. In fact, I think right now it has gotten to a case of INEC actually isn't being held accountable, for the conduct of elections anymore. It's a case of, if you're not satisfied, go to court. So I'm not really surprised with what Dino Melaye is saying, but then how successful, will his challenge be if he does indeed take it to the law courts? Considering the fact that he came in third place, the SDP is also there, but then of course we've seen the power of incumbency at work. If you look at the off-cycle elections, the 2 7 governors in Bayelsa State, in Imo State, they got their victory. The 7th governor in Kogi State also successfully, got his anointed candidate elected. So of course we've witnessed the power of incumbency at play. The opposition will challenge the results. Whether they will succeed at the law courts, time will tell. But at the same time, I feel that what we need to do now is probably make some electoral reforms, that will hold INEC accountable for the conduct of this election. INEC must bear some burden of responsibility, for the issues and the controversies that usually trail our elections in Nigeria.
The big question everyone always asks is there the political way to actually make that happen? Because if some would say that, some political analysts will always say, and political scientists will always say, that if the process is almost seamless, people that benefit from chaos and all of this, on all that actually happens, will not be able to get their way forward, because we could see pockets of incidences happening with question marks being raised about votes coming out from Adavi, from Okehi, from Dekina, from Ogurimagungu. And a lot of people were asking INEC that on the back of all those things, you shouldn't have actually announced this result, because there were huge question marks, and INEC even admitted that there were issues whereby forms were already filled before the elections even started, and they've not named, they've not shamed anyone at the moment, but they've gone on to actually announce this. So if there are major political reform that actually levels the playing field,
well,
what that becomes, Some will. Some probably politicians might not be able to benefit as much. So hence, there might not be a political will to
Aaron,
ensure the political process
your question is actually very
watertight.
valid. Your question is actually very valid. Do we have the political will? At the moment, I would say no. But then we have to keep talking, and we'll keep pushing for the reforms. The reforms will not be perfect, but we'll keep, moving one step at a time, and hopefully one day soon we'll get there. And then I remember there was something that Umaudi said, one of the civil society coalition organizers, and she said that parties in power right now should remember that what they do right now would actually haunt them in future.
True.
At a time, PDP, which Dino Melaye belongs to, was the ruling party and had the power to make all these reforms.
Yes.
But because they were benefiting from it, they did not. Now look at them, they're the ones crying wolf now.
True.
So APC is enjoying, the largesse that comes probably with not doing what it should at the moment. But for how long? That's food for thought for our political parties. If only they can actually sit down, think, and then act.
All right. Let's move on. Okay, let's turn our attention now to the Nigeria-Saudi Investment Roundtable, which took place over the weekend in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where President Bola Ahmed Tinubu deliberated with captains of industry and made it clear that Nigeria is open for business. Tinubu traveled with some ministers, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tuga, and Wale Edun, Minister of Finance. However, other dignitaries and industry stakeholders, including Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, the chairman of This Day and Arise Media Group, Prince Nduka Ogbagbena, were all in attendance. Ogbagbena, after the summit, charged the president to make good on investment promises.
It's a rousing welcome for Nigeria. It was a great trip. The president led the charge, calling for investments for Nigeria as the chief marketing officer for Nigeria. And the people of Saudi gave a resounding welcome. Now the details is in the action. Thank you very much.
The details is in the action. Actually holding the government accountable there, and actually, because words and promises can be made, roundtable discussions can be had, implementation is all that matters. And that is where the proof of the pudding is at the moment.
Well, of course. Chairman of This Day and Arise Media Group, Prince Nduka Ogbagbena, he has said it all. The detail is in the action. They can do all the Jojo and all the talk, but without any action, everything is meaningless and it's empty. So like the chairman said, the president has done a good job marketing Nigeria. He represented Nigeria well at the summit. But then it is now time to walk the talk, and hold the investors, by their neck, really, so to speak, so that they redeem their pledges in helping to boost our oil and gas sector. Talked about helping to repair refineries, talked about boosting agricultural sector, construction, and other areas under consideration that were discussed at the summit. So it is up to the president and, of course, his team to ensure, that this does not just end at the level of talk, but that there's action, that follows the talk, and Nigeria, at the end of the day, will benefit, from the summit.
And not just even that alone, because we can't be going out the chairman has actually mentioned that you can't go out as a president marketing the nation. But what about the companies in Nigeria that are not finding it conducive? The ease of doing business is not as seamless as it should be. Hence, we're seeing companies checking out of Nigeria and going to neighboring countries because they have a better competitive edge than actually doing business from Nigeria. Because that is very, very important. You might bring them in. If the environment, the political climate, the economic climate is not conducive enough, it's only a matter of time. Because people are beginning to complain that that cost of certain goods are actually on the rise, especially with the exit of a huge pharmaceutical company that has actually left Nigeria. It has actually put quite a lot of people, especially the masses, in a very precarious circumstance. And that is something we need to look at. The ease of doing business in Nigeria cannot be overemphasized. It's one thing to bring in investment. It's another thing to keep that investment. It's another thing to create the economic climate so that those investments can thrive and also attract other investors into Nigeria?
I mean, definitely, Aaron, you've said it all. And then, of course, the issue of security as well.
Oh,
you know,
big one.
that's a major issue that should be tackled. So it's not just all about talk, you know, like the chairman said. You know, now the detail is in the action on the part of the president and his team, ensuring that Nigeria is conducive for business and that Nigeria indeed really is ready for business. It's so easy to make all such declarations, you know, but what we are seeing on ground might not actually support what he's saying. So now it's time to walk the talk. You know, and then of course ensure that those who have pledged, you know, to invest in our economy, they are able to do so, they're free to do so, and of course they also reap the benefits, you know, of investing in the Nigerian economy. Well, Nigeria's headline inflation rate increased to 27.33% relative to the September 2023 headline inflation rate, which was 26.72%. Looking at the movement, the October 2023 headline inflation rate showed an increase of 0.61 percentage points when compared to the September 2023 headline inflation rate. However, on a month-on-month basis, the headline inflation rate in October 2023 was 1.73%, which was 0.37% lower than the rate recorded in September 2023.
All right, we're seeing inflation.
Well, inflation, I mean, all Nigerians can relate with this. This is the 10th consecutive rise in the country's inflation rate this year. Consumer Price Index rose up from 26.72% now at 27.3%. Now, food inflation, a very, very essential commodity, rose to 31.25%, which is 7.80% higher than last year. So now this brings me to my question. How effective then, as the president's declaration, you know, of food emergency? You remember he declared, food emergency, state of emergency of food insecurity in July.
Yes, it did.
Was that just an empty declaration?
No. My own concern is that some key products are actually driving this inflation, because if you do not check this, what we're talking about the emergency declaration will not hold water ultimately. Bread, yam, and potatoes actually accounted for the bulk of the 31.52 inflation in food. And it's unfortunate that these are staples here in Nigeria, because you look at it, Nigerians actually, although rice is another staple in Nigeria, but the fact that the cost of bread at the moment, which is continually on the rise, the cost of yam, potatoes, is causing inflation. And more importantly, looking at that particular statistics and the entire index, they say that residents in Kogi and Kwara, and not forgetting Lagos State, so people like you and I, all right, have paid the highest for food in October. So those who live in Lagos, Kogi, and Kwara.
I know what, Aaron,
yes.
I mean, I really don't want to sound like a prophet of doom,
Okay.
but, you know, I feel like it's a very dire outlook for the country, especially when you consider that Christmas and New Year celebrations, you know, are coming up. So the possibility that the inflation rate is still going to rise is actually very, very high. And then when you also look at the depreciation of the Naira, you know, by over 50% after the CBN collapsed all forex windows, of course, we know that it's causing, you know, serious hardship for Nigerians. The prices just keep skyrocketing already. And, you know, children really, they don't care about this, because now parents are thinking of how they are going to buy Christmas wares for their children. And
also ensure that they actually get enough to eat during the Christmas and the Yuletide season. It's unfortunate, but those in Kogi, Kwara, and Lagos State, more importantly, will need to tighten their belt, because we're having to pay more for food at this period in time, and we're hoping that when the numbers come out for November, that maybe there might be a drop, but at the moment,
there might be. Aaron?
I'm being optimistic, and that's the best I can do. But let my focus be optimistic, because at the moment it's not looking entirely good for those in that particular region. And you would expect that places like Kogi, for example, Kwara, that are close to very, very lush and very, very close to states that are actually producing rich, abundant crops and food, should not be actually experiencing this. But the reverse seems to be the case.
And then of course the issue of fuel subsidy too. We
Yes.
cannot, remove that from part of the reasons why the inflation rate, keeps rising.
Oh, without a
The
doubt.
cost of fuel for businesses, cost of diesel, cost of transporting, these food products from the north. Of course, at the end of the day, the price, all the cost is passed down, to the consumers. But then I'm just, wondering, really, so how successful really is the federal government's palliative program? We've been hearing about this palliative program for so long. And are Nigerians actually feeling
if I were to
the
cut them
effect?
slack, reforms did not happen overnight. It takes.
But are these reforms, are they well thought out?
Now that's the big question. A lot of people have questioned the thinking behind some of these reforms and if they've been thought through properly. But one thing is certain: I'm hoping that this particular government and those in that particular sector are thinking this thing through and thinking for the long term. Because if you decide to do that, then we might be in safe hands. If not, the future is looking bleak. But I've chosen to I'll probably put on a more optimistic outlook and say that it will only get better. It will only get better.
May our optimism pay off. Well, that's all on the week that was.